Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 41. Silkworm baby sank into contemplation. It was already nearly a month old in terms of the internet age and had expanded its horizons through the internet. It had also learned a lot of general knowledge of the human world from the accomplishment of Sprites, the book written by Elder Bud. It wasn't a sprite that would be easily fooled anymore. The result of the detailed analysis was that having an underling to boss about was indeed not a bad idea and would be very impressive. Since Su Hao was being so kind, then it shall forgive him for everything that happened in the past. Su Hao went to the Sprite Care House in the afternoon on a daily basis after school for quite a few days after he was hired. He stayed in the lounge and got Silkworm baby to make contact with Little Fire Crow instead. Little Fire Crow might be aloof, but at the very least, Silkworm baby was already a sprite of culture after all. Would it be unable to get things done when it was just up against a naive Fire Crow that had just entered the growth stage? True to his expectations, in just a short few days, Silkworm baby had already become friends with Little Fire Crow. Once in a while, Little Fire Crow would also respond with a few squawks, even though it was still silent most of the time. First step of the plan, completed. Su Hao observed them covertly in the security control room. Silkworm baby was just an entry point. The key was still Su Hao himself, of course. Little Fire Crow's detailed information surfaced in his eyes once more. Its favorite types of food were listed among the information. There's nothing in this world that cannot be resolved with a meal. If there is, then make it 2 meals. Compared to wood element sprites, fire element sprite cultivation was a little more troublesome. This particular Little Fire Crow was even a picky eater too. Su Hao ordered some special food ingredients on the internet. He also bought some spiritual items from Green Shade Supermarket. Days passed. There wasn't much change in Su Hao's lifestyle. If he really had to come up with one, then it was that he had more freedom now. Coach Xiang no longer arranged compulsory training for him. Old Chen didn't mind in the least even if he read other books during lessons, either. He received true star student treatment, and he even gained a lot of fans. Great God Su, the speed of my little rolling stone is too low. It looks like a sitting duck all the time. What should I do? You're not going in the right direction. Little rolling stone is an armored sprite. Tanking one is the absolute way to go. If you really have to move, then you can try the unique skill, rolling. Your little rolling stone is equipped with the conditions to learn unique skills now anyway. Great God Su, why isn't my Viney climbing up the anti-theft window anymore lately? It used to love clinging to the anti-theft window exterior to sunbathe the most in the past. Check the weather forecast more often. It's been very sunny recently, and we've been training in the field a lot lately. Isn't the amount of sunlight your vine snake is exposed to enough? Great God Su, why doesn't my little stone elephant eat meat? I prepared such a sumptuous feast, yet it wouldn't even look at it. Do you have some kind of misconception about your little stone elephant? Great God Su. For a while, Su Hao became someone who held even more power and prestige than Old Chen and Old Gu in the school. It was second only to Coach Xiang. However, Su Hao felt that Coach Xiang's authority came purely from the threat of his iron fists. Neither was Su Hao too impatient to answer his classmates' questions, it was just a few words anyway. It was just that. Can all of you ask questions that are slightly more specialized? As expected, I, who is excessively outstanding, am finding myself feeling like I'm out of place in this class as usual. On Saturday, Su Hao was on duty at the Sprite Care House. He no longer held any hope in things like customers by now. He left everything to fate instead. The previous night, when he had logged into the internal marketplace of the Union of Sprite Trainers, the status of improved charging had already changed from unprocessed to pending verification. The outcome should be out in 2 to 3 days. As long as improved charging could get listed for sale in the marketplace, with a bit of accumulation, buying Little Fire Crow wouldn't be a problem. Unexpectedly, shortly after he took a seat, a receptionist from the lower floors led a customer up. It was a middle-aged man who had a fluffy ball with him. "You must be little brother Su. I came here today, especially for a consultation with you after hearing about you. My name is Wang. Big brother Wang." Su Hao had originally wanted to address him as Uncle Wang, but after a moment's consideration, he felt that doing that would make him look immature. "I heard about you from my cousin's neighbor's second nephew," said Uncle Wang. Su Hao was taken aback for a moment. It was then that he realized that it might be his classmates from the Sprite stream who were advertising for him. Fame within an city, +1. The man even hailed him as the most dazzling genius in an city first high. This. What kind of truth are you spouting? Su Hao was someone who kept a low profile after all, so he quickly went straight to the main topic. "Big brother Wang, your fluffy ball must have gotten stuck at the final step after approaching the limit of its spiritual force, right?" Yes, that's right. As expected of a sprite cultivator, you could tell right away." Su Hao thought for a moment. Then, his fingers began to tap away on the keyboard. In no time, he had drawn up a cultivation plan and printed it. "Big brother Wang, your fluffy ball's main issue is that its spiritual force value is stuck at 99 points. However, it's already very close to reaching 100 points. You need only to use method A and method B, and supplement it with material C, to let fluffy ball gain that last bit of spiritual force. After that, the sprite can begin the preparations to compress its spiritual force and break through to entry level." Big brother Wang was taken aback. He held the plan, which still had some residual warmth to it, in his hand. "That's all." All of a sudden, he felt that the money he had paid was a little of a waste. Wasn't this a little too patronizing? Su Hao smacked his head. He understood the moment he saw the man's expression. He was still too inexperienced. When customers approached sprite cultivators for a consultation regarding cultivation plans, even the lowest fee charged came up to 3,000 yuan. How could he simply just write him a plan and be done with it? At the very least, he needed to put on a show. "How about this, Big brother Wang, bring your sprite over here for a checkup." Su Hao called for a staff member who opened the door to the physical examination room next door. There were devices inside that could detect a sprite's spiritual force, the sturdiness of their physique, and other detailed statistics, such as their height, fur length, and so on. Su Hao had thought that they wouldn't come into play. But now that he thought about it, could a sprite cultivator command such a high consultation fee without the expensive equipment? Give this fluffy ball a thorough examination. It didn't cost anything anyway. Amidst a slew of actions which Su Hao couldn't understand performed by the staff, the fluffy ball was given a thorough examination. The results were printed on the spot. Su Hao glanced at it before handing it to Uncle Wang. Uncle Wang took a look. Then, he picked up the plan which Su Hao had drawn up earlier and compared them. His expression changed from one of surprise to astonishment, and then to shock. The sprite statistics in the papers were actually exactly the same. No, the sprite statistics in the plan that Su Hao, Master Su had given him were even more detailed than the ones on the examination results. Uncle Wang was both shocked and ashamed of himself. He had indeed come here especially to look for Su Hao for a consultation, but it wasn't because of his so-called genius reputation or whatnot. There was only one reason: it was cheap. As a new entry-level sprite cultivator, Su Hao's consultation fee was the cheapest. Fluffy Ball wouldn't have been stuck at a spiritual force value of 99 due to malnourishment if his finances had been sufficient. Uncle Wang looked at Su Hao. Su Hao returned a smile but didn't say anything. Everything was communicated in silence. He opened and closed his mouth. In the end, he said his thanks and left with Fluffy Ball. Su Hao felt that he had likely found himself a regular customer, probably. Gurgle. Gurgle, gurgle. Suddenly, he heard Silkworm Baby's familiar cries. When he turned and took a look, he saw that a pale yellow figure had already climbed up to the window on the third floor at some point. It knocked on the window and called out to him. Su Hao was taken aback for a moment. What, the things I ordered have arrived? And you've even signed for them? How did you do that? Su Hao was dumbstruck. Chapter 42. It wasn't important how Silkworm baby had signed for it. Su Hao opened the parcel and took out several supplementary materials. Things like red maple tree leaves, crystallized volcanic rock, and so on weren't that expensive and valuable. It was just that they were troublesome to get one's hands on. Fortunately, there was the almighty online shopping that delivered straight to the doorstep. He didn't even need to sign for it himself. Not everything in this batch of products that he had ordered was meant to be used on the little fire crow. To be more specific, it was because the way Silkworm baby had looked at Su Hao wasn't quite right when he had been ordering special food ingredients for little fire crow. Thus, he also ordered a batch of wood element ingredients meant for Silkworm baby's consumption. In terms of quantity, it was a little more than the fire element ingredients. They made up an approximate 6:4 ratio. Other than supplementary materials, there was also a lot of jade powder to act as the main ingredient. This way, he would be able to create a truly nutritious meal for the sprites. Several types of primary level and mid-level jade powder were needed for this. The control of the jade powder ratio was very important here. It was only when the ratio was just right and mixed with the supplementary materials that it would truly be a nutritious feast. If the ratio wasn't right, it would just be an expensive mix of jade powder. It was said that jade powder recipes like this one were the secret recipes of many veteran sprite cultivators. Even in the Union of Sprite Trainers marketplace, there were only a few very basic recipes for sale. From this, one could see just how valuable jade powder recipes were. However, Su Hao didn't think so. When basic cultivation had been unlocked, 2 recipes had been provided. When spiritual force enhancement cultivation had been unlocked, another 3 recipes had been provided. It was just a pity that they were only suitable for Silkworm baby. There was a reduction in effectiveness even if they were used on other Silkworm babies. Su Hao felt that little fire crow and himself were destined to be. Thus, he had unlocked its cultivation plans a few days ago. It was his first time unlocking things related to fire element sprites, so it was a little expensive. Sprite, little fire crow. Omitted. Basic cultivation, unlock with 915 intelligence points. Just like before, 2 recipes had been provided in basic cultivation. Accuracy was imperative during the concoction process, and the Sprite Care House happened to have the apparatus and facilities he needed. Su Hao borrowed a room. Information on one of the recipes surfaced in his mind. Just as he was about to begin concocting the blend. All of a sudden, he noticed Silkworm baby, which was watching him curiously, at the side. His hand, which was reaching toward the jade powder, suddenly paused. Then, he nonchalantly picked up a portion of wood element jade powder that was slightly further away and began to concoct a blend. This was the first time he was doing this, after all. Despite having rich theoretical knowledge, Su Hao's technique was still slightly raw. Roughly half an hour later, on the first floor of the Sprite Care House, where the sprites were reared, there was a new regular visitor recently, a silkworm baby that was several times bigger than sprites in their infancy stage. It frequently approached the little fire crow. Gurgle. Squawk. Little fire crow had already gotten used to silkworm baby. After responding, it continued to stare at the wall and contemplate its crow life. However, it didn't fly away. Compared to the other immature sprites, Silkworm baby seemed like it had very strong opinions of its own. Little fire crow still remembered what it had said the other day. Silkworm baby had said, "Money is almighty. If you disagree, then that must be because you don't have enough money." Little fire crow found that this made a lot of sense. If it had 300,000 yuan, would it mean that it would be able to buy back its freedom? It didn't dislike staying at the Sprite Care House. It was just that foolish people were attempting in vain to contract it every week. Little Fire Crow found this very annoying. If it had 300,000 yuan, it would be able to buy itself some peace. At this point, it reached mealtime. The Sprite Care House staff members brought them their fodder. It wasn't jade powder but just regular fodder. The Sprite Care House only fed the sprites jade powder 2 to 3 times a month. This was also one of the reasons why the Sprite Care House only sold sprites in their infancy stage. Sprites in the growth stage would have entered puberty and would need a lot of nutrition. The Sprite Care House couldn't afford the upkeep for so many of them. The more mature a sprite was, the harder it was to contract them as well. Little Fire Crow pecked at and ate some of the fodder until it was 3/4 full. Humans said that being 3/4 full was healthier. Gurgle. Little Fire Crow turned over. It noticed that what was placed in front of Silkworm Baby wasn't fodder but a small and exquisite box. What was that? Gurgle. Jade powder? Little Fire Crow lost interest right away. Gurgle gurgle, gurgle. Little Fire Crow was taken aback. It didn't quite believe what Silkworm Baby was saying. Squawk, squawk. The taste of jade powder was merely a little better than fodder. How could it possibly be a level of deliciousness that it, Little Fire Crow, had never tried before in its life? Do you think that I, Little Fire Crow, have never eaten jade powder before? It flapped its wings. Silkworm Baby opened the box of jade powder. The carefully prepared jade powder set meal gave off a gentle glow. It emanated an allure that was hard to put into words. Gurgle, gurgle. Silkworm Baby couldn't hold back much longer. But it thought of Su Hao's instructions, so it called out to Little Fire Crow again. Gurgle. Squawk. Little Fire Crow cast a glance at it. So this was the kind of food that human feeders meticulously prepared? It was very delicious. And one could even become stronger after eating it. It was a kind of luxury that spread all the way from the body to the mind. As long as one entered a contract with the feeder, they would be able to enjoy delicious jade powder every day. Squawk. Little Fire Crow turned away. It didn't believe Silkworm Baby's words. The food just looked a little better, that was all, wasn't it? At this point, a human brought another exquisite box over and placed it in front of its eyes. Gurgle. Squawk. This was a present from the feeder? Did he think that it, Little Fire Crow, was that easy to bribe? It was a little Fire Crow with great pride and a mind of its own. Even if it starved to death outside, it wouldn't enter a contract with a foolish human just for a bit of food. The human who brought the present opened the box of jade powder. A misty red glow burst forth from the box. Little Fire Crow was stunned. It couldn't stop itself from going nearer. There was an unfathomable allure coming from the box of jade powder. It bent over and pecked at it lightly. Squawk. When he sensed that intimate link in his soul, Su Hao's heart became at ease. Sneaking poison into the jade powder. Ah, pui. Mixing a drop of blood into the jade powder wasn't behavior that was unheard of. However, it didn't mean that one would be able to contract a sprite just because it ate the drop of blood. Consent from both parties was still necessary, and it must come sincerely from one's heart. Even if one defeated or drugged a sprite into unconsciousness, they wouldn't be able to forcibly contract it. Su Hao had originally been prepared for a long and drawn-out battle, but unexpectedly, a meal. No, just a bite alone had bribed the Little Fire Crow. All those people who had failed to contract it previously were practically an embarrassment. Squawk. Little Fire Crow noticed the person standing in front of it. Compared to the other foolish humans, this person was like a breath of fresh air. He emanated a different kind of charm from inside out. Was this person its Sprite Trainer? But even so, it was simply such an embarrassment. How could it let itself be contracted just by a bite alone? At the very least, it should have been 2 bites. No, 3. Squawk. Squawk. Little Fire Crow pecked at the jade powder and took a few more bites to conceal its embarrassment. Su Hao reached out and stroked Little Fire Crow's head. The basic cultivation plan for Little Fire Crow surfaced in his mind. There are only 2 short months left until the joint combat practice. To prevent Little Fire Crow from embarrassing itself when the time came, he needed to make full use of the time he had to nurture it. Considering his status now, he could give the sprites extra meals frequently. In that case, increasing the sprites' training load would also be reasonable and logical, right? Little Fire Crow enjoyed the gentle touch coming from the human. It pecked at the delectable jade powder set meal again and felt like it had reached the peak of its crow life, entirely unaware that the dark and hellish next day was lying in wait. Chapter 43. At the back of Lake East Hill. Flap, flap. A crow with a sprig of flaming red feathers on its forehead was flying about in the forest. While flapping its wings, it circled one round before returning and landing on Su Hao's shoulder. Su Hao pressed the button on the timer. 56 seconds. Not bad, you've improved. Squawk. Then let's go for another round. Aim for 54 seconds this time. Squawk. If you manage to do it, I'll give you extra goodies for lunch. Squawk. Little Fire Crow flapped its wings and swooped outward at once. Su Hao looked at the other side. In front of a huge rock riddled with holes was Silkworm Baby with a stern expression. Its big and moist eyes were focused straight ahead. After a moment's mental preparation, at last, specks of green light appeared in front of Silkworm Baby's mouth and converged into a tiny green ball. The ball expanded swiftly. In the blink of an eye, it was already the size of a fist. Energy ball. From Su Hao's angle, it looked just like 2 concentric circles stacked on top of each other. The inner circle was filled with rich and dense wood element energy, while the outer circle was translucent. One could see a large volume of tiny green specks vibrating wildly. This ball of energy was already showing signs of instability. Silkworm Baby hurled it out swiftly. The fist-sized ball of energy shot out with a whoosh. It stayed close to the ground, sending countless fallen leaves flying as it whooshed about. The ball of energy shot past and crashed right against the large rock. Boom! An explosion rang out. Smoke and dust pervaded the air, and bits of rock flew everywhere. Su Hao looked over. The impact made a shallow pit the size of a basketball's cross-section in the large rock. It didn't contain a lot of power. After all, this was just an entry-level energy ball. It didn't fully maximize Silkworm Baby's spiritual force that had already reached 90 points at this point. However, it was already much stronger than granule machine gun and charging. Gurgle. Not bad, not bad. Your battle system has basically already taken form. Su Hao went on. What you should do next is to continuously accumulate your spiritual force and compress it until you reach your limit. After that, you can prepare to break through. Gurgle. Evolve? You have to break through to entry level before you evolve, so as to avoid wasting your potential. Understand? Gurgle. Although Su Hao didn't understand why Silkworm Baby was so hung up over evolving, this was something positive. With a goal now, Silkworm Baby indeed showed an explosive and different training condition. After Silkworm Baby's energy ball reached entry level, its improvement was visible. It was also close to mastering string shot. He didn't need to worry about the rest of Silkworm Baby's training anymore. Little Fire Crow, on the other hand. Where was it? When Su Hao went looking for it, he spotted Little Fire Crow perching on a tree branch and quietly musing as it stared at the leaves. I had already nurtured Silkworm Baby to maturity, but here's another Little Fire Crow to worry about now. Su Hao pressed his fingers against his temples and mulled over this. Suddenly, he got an idea. He approached Silkworm Baby, which was currently in the midst of practicing its energy ball. Silky, I have an important mission for you. Gurgle. Silkworm baby shot several meters backward and looked at him with wariness in its big eyes. Look at what had happened the last time Su Hao said that. It won't fall for it anymore. Su Hao stiffened slightly. Silkworm baby must hold some kind of misunderstanding toward me. But all right, never mind. Silky, let me ask you something. Is Little Fire Crow your underling or not? Silkworm baby thought about it and nodded slowly. In that case, is it reasonable and logical that you, as its senior, guide your junior? Silkworm baby shook its head resolutely. Su Hao's expression froze in embarrassment. His mind ran at full speed. After thinking for a while, he asked, "Do you know what the most important thing is if you want an underling whom you can order around?" Silkworm baby continued to stare at him warily. It didn't answer. Su Hao went on. "It's prestige. Right now, in Little Fire Crow's eyes, you're just an experienced senior. If you wish to order it around just by relying on this aspect, this won't be enough. This is because you don't hold enough authority in Little Fire Crow's eyes." He paused for a moment. When he noticed Silkworm baby showing a contemplative look, Su Hao struck while the iron was hot. "But if you guide Little Fire Crow in its training so that it becomes stronger, you'll be an impressive and reliable senior in its eyes. If you want it to fly to the east, it'll never fly toward the west. It's only when that happens that you truly have an underling whom you can order around." Silkworm baby thought for a moment. In the end, it thought that what Su Hao said made sense. In order to gain an underling which can assist it, it shall accept this important mission. Gurgle. While watching it run toward where Little Fire Crow was, a comforting smile appeared on Su Hao's face. Silkworm baby shall take care of Little Fire Crow's foundational training. When it reaches a certain point, I'll unlock the unique skills that Little Fire Crow needs to learn, and that'll do. I can finally concentrate on my own affairs now. What was he busy with? Earning money, of course. Buying Little Fire Crow cost him 200,000 yuan. He had only been left with 30,000 to 40,000 yuan previously. Zhao Liangke was willing to pay 200,000 yuan for him in advance, but Su Hao didn't agree to it. If he really couldn't afford it, owing someone a favor wasn't that big of a deal after all, he had the ability to repay it. However, his family was able to provide this sum of money. Right from the start, his parents had already prepared 300,000 to 400,000 yuan as a year's worth of expenses for him in the Sprite stream. Apart from the 180,000 yuan used to purchase Silkworm baby, he hadn't touched this sum of money much. Su Hao initially didn't plan to use it either, but he was too destined to be with Little Fire Crow. If he missed out on it this time, he might not even be able to contract a sprite like Little Fire Crow with 300,000 to 500,000 yuan in the future. He wasn't an inflexible person. He would spend when he should. But after spending, he would need to quickly earn the money back. "I'll go for duty at the Sprite Care House on Mondays, Tuesdays and Fridays in the afternoon after school, as well as the whole of Saturdays and Sundays, from now on." The Sprite cultivators at the Sprite Care House seemed to have already earned enough money. Apart from the stipulated half-days where they were required to be on duty, they rarely appeared. What would happen if customers came and couldn't find a Sprite cultivator? They would come again another day, of course. Sprite cultivators were simply this impressive. Su Hao decided that from now on, he would head over whenever there were no Sprite cultivators on duty. Also, he accessed the Union of Sprite Trainers intranet on his cell phone and logged into his account. A red dot, signifying a notification, appeared at the upper right corner. Su Hao's eyes lit up. When he opened it, a message appeared. "Dear elementary level Sprite cultivator Su Hao, your improved charging has passed the verification check. It has been listed for sale at a retail price of 1,000 yuan. Ding! You have received 300 union points." Su Hao took a look at the explanatory guide. Union points were used to increase an account's access privileges. Previously, his access privileges were at level 1. It had advanced to level 2 now, so the content he could browse and products he could buy had increased quite greatly. But those aren't important. Su Hao filtered the unique skills for sale in the marketplace. At last, he saw the improved charging, which he had uploaded. The evaluation given by the union's verification officer is pretty good. There's actually even small-scale promotion for it. Su Hao took a look. In just mere minutes after it had passed the verification check, improved charging had already sold more than 100 times. If I can get 500 yuan per sale, 100 sales would be. Su Hao's eyes turned into dollar signs. It seemed like whether or not he went for duty at the Sprite Care House wasn't that important anymore. He was the picture of arrogance now. Chapter 44. Su Hao expanded for a while and then contracted again. The moment he saw the exorbitant prices listed underneath several product listings, it was as though he had been doused with cold water. He couldn't even be arrogant anymore. At the bottom of it all, improved charging was just a basic unique skill. It could only bring him a bit of money. There was also an innumerable number of improved unique skills for sale in the marketplace. There were dozens of improved versions for just charging alone, just that the direction of the improvements was different. The unique skill training method he provided was very all-rounded. This was a merit. However, other Sprite trainers becoming astounded the moment they took a look and clamoring to buy it. This existed only in his dreams. The passive income from improved charging alone should be enough to cover my expenses before the college entrance examination. Money came too easily. This thought even flashed in Su Hao's mind for a moment. Should he improve a few more unique skills and upload them to the union marketplace? After thinking about it, he gave up on the thought. Money was vulgar and in bad taste. He was not the least bit interested in it. Intelligence points was his true love instead. But if I just so happen to need to improve a unique skill, then I might as well sell it. November 4th, Monday. Su Hao, Sprite Trainer intern. Intelligence points, 163. Soul power, 10.14, 7.51 plus 2.13. Contracted Sprite, Silkworm baby, pre-entry level, spiritual force, 93. Little Fire Crow, pre-entry level, spiritual force, 26. Unlocked cultivation plan, S omitted. Unlocked unique skill, S feather needles, Little Fire Crow, yet to be learned, Fireball, Little Fire Crow, yet to be learned, Flaming Claw, Little Fire Crow, yet to be learned. Currently, it was the morning reading period. In the classroom, some of the students were quietly reading their textbooks, some were in a discussion about sprites, some were dealing with their breakfast, and some were doing handstands at the wall to train their physique. Sprites banded in groups and made full use of the time they had to play for a while longer before the marionette appeared. Silkworm baby and Little Fire Crow weren't around. Su Hao didn't bring them to the classroom. He had already applied for permission to allow his sprites to do self-training, other than during some of the important classes. Thanks to the sprite cultivator effect, the teachers had agreed to it. At this point, at his seat next to the window, Su Hao was scribbling away at full speed on a piece of paper in his hand. Next to him, a pancake face craned his neck. On the table a short distance away, there was also a little charcoal tortoise similarly craning its neck. What Su Hao was currently writing was Little Charcoal Tortoise's cultivation plan. This was a full-fledged cultivation plan, not the casual tips that Su Hao gave his classmates usually. As a buddy, Su Hao naturally wouldn't decline Lu Ren's request. It didn't inconvenience him. Nor did he ask for any money. Was he, Su Hao, someone who lacked even that bit of money? 100,000 yuan. Lu Ren said, "This sum of money is from my father. He said that you must accept it. If you don't, it means that you are looking down on my father." Su Hao was bewildered. Lu Ren chuckled sneakily as he went on. My father has already told me all of the 10 odd orders that you completed in the Sprite Care House have received positive feedback, so your consultation fee has already risen from 3,000 to 5,000 yuan. My father said that 100,000 yuan is a reasonable price for the full-fledged cultivation plan that I'm asking for. Besides, Lu Ren lowered his voice. If you draw up a cultivation plan for me for free, what if other students ask you to do it for them in the future too? In any case, you just need to be more detailed in the plan, and this sum of money will be well spent. He transferred 100,000 yuan to him without any hesitation. Su Hao had declined it initially. He was already a big boss who could earn 50,000 to 60,000 yuan per day. But the money that Lu Ren was giving him was honestly. Don't worry. Your father has always been someone whom I respect very much. Su Hao thought for a moment. The only thing he could do was to insert more unnecessary, include more details, and try his best to match the value of the 100,000 yuan consultation fee. Su Hao wrote a few hundred words. After rubbing his somewhat weary palm, he asked Lu Ren, "You've been wailing all this time, so you must have approached a sprite cultivator for consultation before in the past too." "I did approach them before, but even after spending so much, my master tortoise is still lagging so far behind your silkworm god. Doesn't this indicate that there's a problem?" Su Hao thought about it. That made sense. His excellence was there for all to see. "Nevertheless," he replied, "that's because I'm familiar with Silkworm baby and frequently observe its changes. That's why I'm able to draw up the best cultivation plan for it. But in the case of little charcoal tortoise, I'm not going to have that kind of ability." Yet, don't worry." Lu Ren waved dismissively. "You're clearly very outstanding, yet you're overly humble. This just ends up becoming humble bragging, you know." Su Hao spent nearly an hour before he finally finished the cultivation plan. For the sake of 100,000 yuan, he could only let his hands suffer. He said, "Big Face Lu, buy all the things on this list and bring them here tomorrow. I have to do some experiments and observe the results so that I can make the final adjustments for the plan." By the time Su Hao was done, the Monday class meeting period was already over. Shortly after, the bell rang, and it was time for the second period. It was still old Chen who entered the classroom. However, the strange thing was that Marionette, which always came along to keep the novice sprites in check, was nowhere in sight. Old Chen knocked on the blackboard. The classroom quickly quietened. Worried that this was a trap, the novice sprites displayed a well-behaved and obedient disposition nonetheless. "Class, the upcoming lessons for this week are very important. Whether you're down with the flu, having a fever, or intending to apply for a leave of absence, I hope all of you can try your best to show up for the lessons." Old Chen paused for a moment before she went on. "As all of you know, sprites possess extraordinary power. Even though sprite trainers like us have a different body constitution from other people because of the sprites' feedback benefits, we are a far cry from the sprites. In that case, other than being a commander and observer, what else can we, sprite trainers, do? This student there, can you tell me the answer?" Boy A in the front row stood up involuntarily. With some nervousness and hesitation, he answered, "We can also provide buffs1 for the sprites T through our soul power." "That's correct." "Good, take a seat." Old Chen then said, "During the process of sprites providing feedback benefits, the indicator with the most obvious improvement is our soul power. Let me ask all of you this: has anyone had their soul power evaluated after you've contracted your sprite?" Whale Lu raised his hand weakly. "Lu Ren, when did you get it evaluated? What was your sprite's spiritual force at that point?" "I got it evaluated 2 months ago, 1.5 months ago, 1 month ago, half a month ago, and a week ago," replied Lu Ren. Old Chen was rendered speechless. "Tell us a bit about your evaluation result from a week ago." "At that time, my soul power was 6.12, while my sprite's spiritual force was roughly 65 points. Old Chen nodded and indicated to Lu Ren to take a seat. Before we contract sprites, the soul power value of most people is only slightly above 1.0. The very few rare ones with great talent are able to hit 2 to 3. But after the contract is formed, as the sprites improve and we receive feedback benefits, our soul power can also increase rapidly. However, in the contract, the portion of soul power occupied by the sprite will also increase correspondingly. Using a pre-contract sprite trainer with a soul power of 1.0 as an example, they probably need to bring their soul power up to at least 9.0 before they can contract their second sprite. That's roughly the point when an infant sprite reaches its limit before entering entry level. However, even if you can't contract a new sprite, soul power is still a power that belongs to us. Through the contract link with the sprite, we, sprite trainers, can use this portion of power. For example, like this. Old Chen had a focused look on her face. She reached her arm out and spread her fingers apart with her palm facing the front. Then, she said softly, "Sprite commandeering, summon." The next moment, Su Hao noticed a cursor-like light appearing right above Old Chen's middle finger. Then, a second cursor-like light appeared at the spot 30 degrees to the right. At this point, time-space seemed to warp a little in front of Old Chen's palm, and the familiar form of marionette jumped out. This is the power of sprite commandeering. When all of you reach the level of an official sprite trainer, you'll even be able to learn some self-defense abilities, such as sprite commandeering, protection, sprite commandeering, damage diversion, and so on. Right now, your soul power is still very weak. However, you can still learn a few of the most basic sprite commandeering moves. Chapter 45. As compared to sprites' powers, sprite trainers' power came from themselves. Everyone was looking forward to it, so was Su Hao. He had known about which types of sprite commandeering there were. For example, sprite commandeering, protection was a critical ability for sprite trainers. Without protection, after the sprite reached extraordinary level or sovereign level, humans wouldn't be even able to stand the side waves of the battle. How would they be able to fight alongside the sprites? Protection's existence also made the sprite trainer less susceptible to assassinations. Yet, their soul power was also limited. When sprite trainers faced sprites, whatever they did, they couldn't fight them head-on. Sprite trainers still had to learn to hide and protect themselves. Protection was only the last resort. Old Chen said, "But soul power is intangible and uncertain. I trust that many among you have tried to use sprite commandeering and failed." Su Hao touched his chin. He kept feeling that she was secretly referring to himself. On the interface, his soul power had already increased nearly 10 times, but he himself still felt nothing. He was still just an ordinary high school student. "It's because your soul powers are still too weak," Old Chen said. "Originally, classes on sprite commandeering are only to be taken in the next semester, but with the college entrance examination reform this year and the joint final examination of 5 schools at the end of this semester, Yunhua University-affiliated high school and Yunhua First High in our neighboring city already taught sprite commandeering last month. So the school decided to bring the sprite commandeering classes forward. To enable you to learn sprite commandeering successfully, the school has specially gotten." Old Chen opened the box in front of her and took out a crystal prism. The crystal had an opaque white color, about the size of a palm. It didn't look extraordinary when placed on the teacher's table. "This is a sprite commandeering crystal. Touching this crystal with your hand will allow you to feel the soul power even more easily. According to the strength of your soul power, the sprite commandeering crystal will produce different degrees of brightness, but not as accurate as the testing equipment at a hospital. This sprite commandeering crystal can only be given to you to use for 1 week. If you can't learn sprite commandeering in 1 week," Old Chen shook her head. "Of course, with the help of the sprite commandeering crystals, so long as you pay attention, you should all be able to learn sprite commandeering successfully. Now, in the order of your student number, you will come forward to touch the crystal." Every person only has 3 minutes, the rest keep quiet. Now, number 1, come forward. A boy with acne on his face walked onto the stage somewhat nervously. Close your eyes and feel it with your heart, said old Chen. The boy held the prism crystal. Instantly, faint purple light glowed. Everyone below was looking intently, not even blinking, not daring to make a sound. Soon. 3 minutes are up. Old Chen asked, how do you feel? The boy opened his eyes in confusion. I didn't seem to feel anything. He bowed his head in shame like a student who did something wrong. Old Chen patted his shoulder. Don't be upset, this is normal. Recall the feeling just now a bit more. Alright, next. One student after another walked up to touch the crystal. The whole classroom was extremely silent, and only faint breathing could be heard. Apart from the break in between when the bell rang, the whole morning would be passed in guiding lessons, guiding the students to feel soul power. The whole following week would be the same. Even Coach Xiang's 2 mass classes were temporarily cancelled. In the second class, Lu Ren went forward. As one of the top 3 students in the class, and a famous rich student, Lu Ren's turn was eye-catching. He took a deep breath and held the crystal prism. The crystal prism shone with a misty purple halo, which was much brighter than the previous classmates. The students below were a little shocked. They only knew that Lu Ren's sprite was strong. During training, Little Charcoal Tortoise, along with Li Songting's Kung Fu Pup, Gu Linjiao's Little Spring Sprite, and Big Boss Su's Silkworm Baby were called the 4 strong in City First High School. But how strong were they? When they saw the brightness of Lu Ren's sprite commandeering crystal, they understood. Brightness equated soul power. Soul power equated feedback benefits from the sprite. Sprite feedback benefits equated sprite power. Is this what a rich kid, no, the weakest of the 4 strong is like? The few classmates after him looked pale under comparison against Lu Ren's brightness. It made Chatterbox Lu grin widely. However, before he grinned for many minutes, Li Songting went forward. After he felt the crystal, a misty purple halo burst out, clearly even brighter than Lu Ren's. 3 minutes later, Li Songting opened his eyes. The crystal prism in his hand was sometimes dim and sometimes bright. I seem to have already felt it. Good. Old Chen nodded approvingly. Remember this feeling and get familiar with it. The sprite commandeering crystal can sense and guide the soul power. When you can touch the crystal and make it not light up, you can learn sprite commandeering. Li Songting walked down. Old Chen continued to read. Next, number 23. Su Hao stood up. The whole class stared at him. He was already used to it. He walked to this plain-looking crystal prism, reached out, held it, and closed his eyes. In the next moment, buzz! There was a series of loud ringing in his brain. It was as though his whole person's soul was pulled out. He sensibly, calmly, and instinctively felt this wonderful power and the 2 closely related connections within Silkworm Baby and Little Fire Crow. Su Hao could sense their approximate location. If he was a bit closer, he felt that he could also send some messages across the air through the contract. It was probably a connection of heart and consciousness. When Su Hao closed his eyes, the crystal prism suddenly burst into a bright and transparent light. It even shone on his face and made it look purple. Lu Ren opened his mouth slightly before covering it suddenly. Li Songting's eyes widened, unable to conceal his fighting intent. Even old Chen was very surprised. On the crystal prism, the purple light shone brighter and brighter. However, in a flash, the bright purple light disappeared. The light was extinguished, and the class was silent. Tuesday. Su Hao requested for leave for the guiding class, which was, according to old Chen, so important that one had to attend even if they had a fever. Old Chen approved with no expression on her face. Su Hao scratched his head. On the interface, there was one more skill: Sprite Commandeering. Sprite Commandeering, accelerate, 1 moment Sprite commandeering, summon, 2 moments Sprite commandeering, self-healing, 2 moments Sprite commandeering. Su Hao looked at Silkworm baby and said, charge. Silkworm baby started running. Around it, light green light dots rapidly gathered and covered its body. Su Hao reached out, pointed, and shouted a little embarrassedly, Sprite commandeering, accelerate. In an instant, just above the finger, a faint light appeared, like a pointer. Soul power was mobilized, transformed into an indescribable special force, and placed on Silkworm baby's body through the contract's connection. The charging Silkworm baby became faster and went out of sight in a moment. Su Hao shifted his gaze toward Little Fire Crow. Use. Never mind, just fly. Squawk. Little Fire Crow opened its wings obediently. Su Hao used Sprite commandeering once again, and an invisible power enveloped it. Little Fire Crow's flying speed increased sharply, and it flopped. Its eyes were filled with panic, as it couldn't stop itself and bumped right into a tree trunk. Bang!